Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Thank you for being here today. There's a nice crowd assembled today. Appreciate your taking some time out on this, what is here anyway, a lovely Saturday afternoon, and coming indoors probably to listen to me talk for a while. Um, this is a presentation for Temple of the Silver Star, hosted specifically by our Proneos in Toronto, which is Circle of Stars Proneos. Had a wonderful visit with them a few weeks ago, and they are doing some great work up there as one of our what we call the Proneos, which is sort of like a temple, a early stage building temple. Um, and of course, we have full temples as well in Raleigh, North Carolina, and in Sacramento, California. At this point, we also have our work available, Temple of the Silver Star, in Albany, New York, in Atlanta, in Philadelphia, in London, outside of London, uh, Seattle, Tacoma area, uh, the Bay Area of California, Los Angeles area, and I've already mentioned Sacramento. I don't think I'm forgetting anyone. Um, so the talk today is on the Holy Guardian Angel, which, as anyone with any exposure to Thelemic um, writings and history knows, is one of those core concepts of the whole tradition. And what I want to do today is sort of a hybrid, give you, especially for those who are a little more new to the concept, give you some background, traditional writings, things that Crowley and others have said about the Holy Guardian Angel, try to interweave in that my own thoughts about what it's all about, and plenty of time for questions also. And then the other thing I really want to try to accomplish today is share a little bit about my own experiences with the HGA, which had its start basically in 2004 with the main working that I did. Share some of my experiences before, during, and after, and the import of those as best I can, and sort of tie that in with my understanding that I'm presenting today of what the Holy Guardian Angel even is. So I haven't talked about this as openly in past years in terms of my personal experience with this, because primarily I've never wanted to front load anyone else's experience with any stuff that's peculiar to me that would just be distracting for other people. It's very easy to, I think, set expectations for oneself based on what's been read or talked about. If you read accounts of Crowley's work, or the Abermillon working, or other people who have written a little bit about their HGA experience, I'm afraid it's a little bit easy to think, oh, that's what it should be like for me. And if it doesn't feel this way or look this way, or if there's not plumes of smoke and brilliant lights, then I've done it wrong. And the last thing I'd want to do is make anyone feel like they've done it wrong simply because it wasn't exactly the same as what I'm describing. Um, but I've seen over the years, again, this for me was 2004 in the winter, late 2004. And I've seen over the years some discussion of the HGA in the form of books people have written and some online discussion, but there's still not much out there, in my view, that's sort of accessible and thorough, and um, also importantly written from a specifically Thelemic perspective on this. So I began to feel in the past few years that it was time to speak more openly about it. Um, Now, I'm no more special than anyone else in terms of this process. It's not that there's anything in particular that I'm going to tell you about my own experience that has more weight or more validity than your own or anyone else's. What I'm primarily concerned with, and what has always really amazed me, is the way the process itself works, the way that the system of organizations like the AA or the Temple of the Silver Star are set up to have some repeatable steps that people go through that help them build the tools that lead them eventually towards the knowledge and conversation of the HGA. And it just it's a thing of beauty to see people walk the steps and get the results. And that has nothing to do with me in particular. That has to do with the structure of the system and the tools that we've inherited from Crowley and others that are so powerful. My understanding about what the HGA is and what knowledge and conversation means has evolved, of course, in the many years. I guess it's 20 years now, if I can manage to do math, since the original event for me. And my sense of how that's integrated into my life and what the long-term implications are of KNC has evolved, as you might expect, over the years. So um, I'm going to give you my best take on it now. 20 years from now, if I do this again, I'll probably have a different take on it. Also, I'll be a lot older and hopefully wiser. That's my aim. Um, so let me begin by quoting Crowley and some others on the nature of the HGA. And in doing so, I think we'll start to shed light on the core concept of it, and then I'll flesh stuff out as I need to. So from the document called One Star in Sight of Crowley's, it is impossible to lay down precise rules by which a man may attain to the knowledge and conversation of his holy guardian angel, for that is the particular secret of each one of us, a secret not to be told or even divined by any other, whatever his grade. It is the holy of holies, whereof each man is his own high priest, and none knoweth the name of his brother's God or the rite that invokes him. So I'll apologize in advance for all the gendered language in these archival sources here, but it was what it was. Um, let me comment on a few of those. His first statement there, it's impossible to lay down precise rules by which a person can do this. That's kind of an extension of what I was saying before. We can give some tools, we can give some procedures that can help lead a person to their own inner truth, but ultimately, you will be the high priest or priestess and prophet of your own religion, and the quote unquote God of that religion will be your HGA, and that will be yours and yours alone. And no one else could tell you, you'll need to do this ritual this many times, or make these ritual gestures right at that point, or here's the name of your angel that you should use. No one else could possibly do that for you. So if anyone is pretending to, question them as a source and question their motives. So it's yours. It really is your journey. Crowley in book 4 says, as was said at the opening of the second chapter, the single supreme ritual is the attainment of the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel. And here's a confusing statement. It is the raising of the complete man in a vertical straight line. What the hell does that mean, Crowley? Well, what he's getting at here is that in order to have true knowledge of conversation, the human being, the aspirant, the magician, the mystic, has to be a balanced, complete individual, has to have stripped away imbalances, has to be centered in their spiritual selves, just at the sort of the Tefereth level. The awakened ego has to be stable and balanced, just at the human level. And then that complete person has to be raised along a trajectory of influx of spiritual force just into this centered, balanced vessel. I've often used the metaphor of a cup, right? That certain processes in the first order have to fashion the cup physically to work without tipping over, without having a hole in it, without being an imbalanced vessel, without being made of paper and fall apart. So the work of the first order of AA and of the initial degrees of orders like Temple of the Silver Star is very much about fashioning the aspirant as a vessel that can contain the force of the angel. The structure has to be right. It has to be able to contain force. It has to not topple. It has to, and you also have to have grown in your insight about the nature of yourself, uh, to make yourself what I would think of as a perfect talisman for your angel. There's a saying that the god will not indwell a temple improperly prepared, and for the HGA to show up for you, you just need to be a fully prepared version of you. And that's what the raising of a complete man in a vertical straight line means to me in that context from Crowley. Next interesting statement in the same source from Big Book 4. Any other operation is black magic. That's interesting. So any other operation other than the raising of the complete man in a vertical straight line and the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel is black magic. This is completely in line with Crowley's definition of black magic as something that is counter to the true will of the individual. The true will, of course, is the will of the deepest, innermost spiritual self, not the passing whims or desires of the ego. So it is our basic nature. The true will is the way we are as a person, the way we must be as a person in order to be maximally efficient in our lives and to take our lives as far as we can in terms of what we can contribute to the world. In order to fully know the true will, we must attain knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, because this represents the influx of complete, as complete as it can be at the time, awareness of our deepest spiritual impulses. So these two things go together. To fully know and understand and live out the true will, we have to attain knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angels, because those definitions are intertwined. But this is black magic, he says, if you diverge from this. So what he's getting at there again is that any magic that is performed that isn't serving the true will, or in the preliminary years isn't serving the path towards the knowledge and conversation of the HGA, is by this definition black magic, because you're off track. You are distracting yourself with stuff that isn't essential. You're not working efficiently for yourself and for the world. If you look at all the tools that exist in systems like AA, divination, learning Kabbalistic symbolism, practicing ritual forms, pentagram, hexagram rituals, star ruby, star sapphire, practicing all the meditative aspects of the work, practicing asana, pranayama, breathing control, mental focus, dharana practices. All of these things are just tools. Enochian magic, Solomonic magic, Goetia. None of these things make any sense to do, according to Crowley, and I agree. They make no sense to do any of these things unless they're leading you toward knowledge and conversation. And once you've had knowledge and conversation, any magic that you choose to do is fully empowered by your understanding of the true will. So all our system, any competently set up magical system, a magical order of training, is going to have only those tools which serve the individual in moving toward knowledge of true will and of knowledge of conversation of the HGA. If the magician needs to perform any other operation than this, the KNC of the HGA, it is only lawful insofar as it is a necessary preliminary to that one work. Okay, so I'll get off my soapbox on that now, but that's something that is so often missed on the fringes of this tradition. If you look online, you'll see people obsessed with every magical variant possible. People who just want to do deep dives into Enochian work or Goetic work or something else, which is great. It's great to have competence in different systems and know a bit about magical history that way. But if it's not in service of pursuing the true will and knowledge conversation of the HGA, then it is, by Crowley's definition, black magic, at least in that sense that it, um, why are you doing it? You know? Um, so I promised I'd get off the soapbox and then continued the soapbox just a little bit, but I'm really done now. Now Crowley says in Liber Samech, the fantastic Scholian portion of that extended commentary on the ritual Liber Samech, which is one of his primary rituals written for another person to attain knowledge and conversation. He wrote it for an initiate named Frank Bennett in the era around the Abbey of Thelema and Cefalù. So he says in the Scholian to Liber Samech, this then is the true aim of the adept in this whole operation, to assimilate himself to his angel by continual conscious communion. For his angel is an intelligible image of his own true will, to do which is the whole of the law of his being. Also the angel appeareth in Tefereth, which is the heart of the Ruach, and thus the center of gravity of the mind. It is also directly inspired from Kether, the ultimate self, through the path of the high priestess, or initiated intuition. Hence, the angel is in truth the logos, or articulate expression of the whole being of the adept, so that as he increases in the perfect understanding of his name, the angel's name, he approaches the solution of the ultimate problem, who he himself truly is. It has been said, and my experience verified this for me at least, that the name of the angel is the formula of existence of the magician. So, for example, I got the name of my angel at one point, and then during my KNC working, kind of played with the letters of the name, and figured out which tarot cards they would apply to, and all of that. And this unlocked this whole story about my own nature, that and therefore true will, that would not have been there otherwise. So this is quite literally true in my view, that the name and the letters of the name of the angel will make a difference in terms of understanding who you are as a person. The other important comment here I wanted to note is that the angel appeareth in Tefereth, as he says. So the center sphere on the tree of life, the center of the Ruach, the ego consciousness, center of gravity of the mind, as he called it, the part of us that takes in all the sensory impressions and intuitions and intellectual thought and emotion and memory, and puts it all together and filters it and computes, okay, what's reality? That's the Tefereth energy. And that's where we sort of marry the Holy Guardian Angel. I emphasize that the HGA doesn't live at Tefereth, it lives Kether or beyond, but we have the wedding at Tefereth. That's when the consciousness is united with the angel. From Magic Without Tears, Crowley says, the Holy Guardian Angel is something more than a man, possibly a being who has already passed through the stage of humanity, and his peculiarly intimate relationship with his client is that of friendship, of community, of brotherhood, or fatherhood. He is not, let me say with emphasis, a mere abstraction from yourself, and that is why I have insisted rather heavily that the term higher self implies a damnable heresy and a dangerous delusion. Now, that doesn't mean that the term higher self has no utility. It means we shouldn't conflate the idea of the higher self with the Holy Guardian Angel, according to Crowley. The concept of higher self has a lot of utility in understanding the makeup of the human psycho-spiritual apparatus. Putting it at Kether, for example, on the Tree of Life makes some sense. But and here's the tricky part in talking about the HGA, that the HGA is not just one's higher self. It's not just one's conscience. It's not just one's better self, or a spiritual self. At other times in his career, Crowley implied it was, depending on who he was talking to. But the good news is you don't have to know the answer to that question at all, because once you have KNC, those questions won't matter. You'll know what the HGA is to you, and it won't matter what anyone else says it is or isn't. My experience was that it very much presented as an exterior being to me, and yet also so intimately intertwined with me and everything I had been and could be, that I still couldn't say, oh, it's separate from me. It's just, um, the experience is one of interfacing with something that is more you, more than you have ever been. So you could never experience it and be saying to yourself, oh, this is an interesting thought I'm having. Feels like I'm talking to a little voice inside. No, it's much more catastrophically amazing than that, and you won't confuse it with an inner voice. I promise. Um, let's look at some other quotes from other people. Carl Germer wrote to my teacher, Phyllis Eckler, in 1952. Carl Germer was Crowley's successor as the head of AA and OTO. Germer said to Phyllis, keep affirming in your heart your longing, your devotion to the HGA. He is constantly around you once he has found ingress to your soul. He is watching over you, and the more you begin to perceive his signs that he is giving you, the more subtle will become your senses and get attuned to his language. Even the apparent difficulties in your life are part of his plan. One thing that all of us forget is that the clock on higher planes does not go by hours, days, months, and years. The periods are different. The crime is impatience. The moment you stop desiring, in comes the HGA. Easy to say, huh? It's the simple things that are hard. Moreover, it is the HGA himself who will set the proper day and hour for the union. Then all will be prepared beautifully and fall on its place. The leisure, the aspiration, the yoga, the surrounding, the silence, and all the rest. Did I not tell you that he arranged everything for me in the solitude of the concentration camp? Learn to abandon yourself with utter confidence to him. Yet, as it is said, invoke often, learn the whole of Liber 65 by heart. So for those who don't know a little bit about Carl Germer's biography, he was actually in a concentration camp in Germany, kind of swept up in the uh, suspicion around Masonic groups there. Um, he was in the concentration camp twice, actually. And while he was in there, he had memorized some of the holy books, and specifically Liber 65, and attained his own knowledge of conversation in the concentration camp via that memorization and the sort of pure devotion that he had around it. And he was trying to pass along, the value and importance of this to Phyllis. Now, you'll note in that quote, and I believe in some of Crowley's earlier quotes too, that the gender of the HGA is stated as masculine. But this varies widely in my experience with myself and with students and colleagues who've had this experience. It's not as predictable as, oh, it'll present as the opposite gender or the same gender or any gender. So that's one of those things you shouldn't get hung up on in terms of having a predisposed idea that it needs to be showing up as any particular kind of human or gender of human or anything like that. So that's sort of my summary of the concept of the HGA historically, and kind of fleshed out as best I can here before I go into more of the detail of my own experience. So does anyone have any questions on any of that? And anything conceptually, historically with regard to Crowley's work with this, anything at all? Happy to open it up.
So I'm not noticing any questions in the chat right now. But I do have a couple of questions that maybe I can keep for later from myself. It's up to you.
Throw those out there unless something pops up in chat.
Sure. Sounds good. So you mentioned Carl Germer, Phyllis Eckler, and I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about certain orders as and certain egregores as a tool, a potential tool in the individual magician's toolbox to help them attain to KNC, what I believe I've heard you call institutional memory. How useful is that, you think, as a tool to sort of supercharge in a way your attainment towards KNC as an individual magician?
That's a great question. I would say that the group mind, the egregore, the fact that one is in a magical order that is what we might call contacted, that is interplane contacts that feed it and energize it. I would say that the main benefit of that is less about a direct influence on the person's path toward HGA, like because we have this, we're plugged into the current, we have special knowledge about initiate X's path. It's more like, in my experience, that a fully functioning order that has the current flowing through it like that um, helps everything about the path of the people in it. It is an energy source that feeds and nourishes each aspirant's journey in the way it needs to at the time. And if it's intelligently arranged as an order, then the tools are staged in a way that help the person strip away the delusions that we all need to strip away in order to be open to the HGA. So more of a generic benefit, I would say, of having an order with a vibrant current that is available to the people in it.
Thank you. We do have one question that just popped up.
Mhm.
What about whisperings of the HGA at the neophyte stage or another stage? What forms would that take? So I believe this refers to the mention of the vision of the Holy Guardian Angel in the AA grade of neophyte.
Yes, and probably also to comments I've made in the past on the Living Thaliba podcast about and in the book about the way the HGA whispers to us. I think I've used that word. Um, so the overarching theme here is that we get glimmers of the HGA's presence throughout our life. We just may not know that that's what it is. And when I have talked about the HGA whispering to us, I often think of it like the HGA is right there, ready to communicate to us all the time. And the question is not like the HGA is somewhere else and we have to go find it, or that it's waiting for us to bring it to us, bring itself to us because it wasn't with us. It's more like it's right here and we just have to know how to listen. So all throughout our lives, and especially once we are consciously on a path toward it, um, the HGA is ready to be telling us important things about the next steps that we should be taking. And it's not literally like a whispering, like an audible whispering. That's a metaphor for the way we get glimmers of the truth along the way. Sometimes there is the sense of a verbal transmission of things. Um, when I was a neophyte, and this ties in with some of the more specific aspects of that question, when I was a neophyte of AA, I had a completely concrete experience of doing, I think I was doing midnight resh at the time in a dark bathroom. I was about to go to bed. And the name was just spoken to me as if there were someone right there by my head. And I was a neophyte, so I had more work to do to get up to the place of doing the knowledge and conversation working, the formal working. But that was pretty striking. And so I took that name as a pretty strong candidate to be the name of the angel. And I was ready for that to be overturned later if it needed to be. But in that instance, it was very much like whispered right in my ear and turned out to be accurate, years later. Someone named Levi had a hand up, and I don't know if
Yeah, sorry.
that or not.
Yeah, no worries.
I
Go
was just
ahead.
gonna I was just gonna piggyback off the whispers for a second and ask about some of the stages that one might uh, have after knowledge and conversation, such as the wedding. I've also heard of something called coronation as sort of post knowledge and conversation stages of relationship with the HGA. Can you comment on that?
Sure. You may get different writers talking about things with different terms, but basically what happens is that the knowledge and conversation is like the wedding in the sense that the relationship's consciously established. But like any marriage, you got to work on it, right? You can't just decide, well, we're married, we never have to communicate again. We're always going to read each other's minds and it'll be perfect. But no, it doesn't go like that, you know? So what you experience after knowledge and conversation is a need to integrate that as fully as possible with your existing life and self. So it's a process of equilibrating the inner and the outer. This is the work leading up to the next grade of AA, which is Adeptus Major, attributed to Gabora, sort of the Karma Yoga grade, where you integrate what you've learned from the HGA about your true will and start to shape your life around it so that you fashion a life that is set up for the living out of your true will. So that's the Karma Yoga aspect. When one continues in that path, again, always deepening one's relationship to the angel, refining the sense of true will, refining the sense of next steps based on true will. You keep on that path, it's inevitable that you become very good at being yourself and very good at doing your true will in the world. That's just a practice effect, and an effect of stripping away extraneous things, and an effect of focusing on the life path that is best suited to you. So this is the work that is characterized by the next grade of AA, Adeptus Exemptus, which corresponds to Chesed on the Tree of Life. It is the highest fulfillment of the human consciousness. That is, it's not like across the abyss type consciousness. This is just maximum human, Adeptus Exemptus. So that process from knowledge and conversation up through Adeptus Major and Adeptus Exemptus characterizes that is the answer to that question of, you know, what happens to the relationship post Caincy.
Thank you.
We have another question, which is, can you lose KNC once you've attained it?
I think what can happen is that, and unfortunately I've seen this, probably some of you have too, one place or another. The ego is a powerful thing, and the human ego, and it likes to have things. It likes to possess things. It likes to be in charge of things. It likes to present itself socially in a way that makes it seem powerful. Okay, so everything that can go wrong with power hungry cravings of a human can still go wrong after knowledge and conversation. So a person could be thinking how cool they are, that they've got the angel, you know, and they can do no wrong now because they've had this attainment, and it feeds the vanity, the spiritual vanity that can be the shadow side of Tefereth. That this, you know, we've done this great thing and now we're an amazing, powerful wizard, and, you know, everyone should acknowledge us. And so there's always that shadow side potential there. So I wouldn't say that that means the knowledge and conversation didn't happen, or that the HGA just leaves or something. I think what has happened there is that the magician, in spite of having KNC, has erected barriers of ego to continued effective communication with the HGA, and so they get way off track, and it becomes a path of what Crowley might call the Black Brothers, or the idea that we become just fascinated and entrenched in the egoic strivings of being the powerful magician who's had HGA, who's had knowledge of conversation.
Thank you. The next question is, are you aware of people achieving KNC through more non-traditional or unorthodox methods, or is it always through the more commonly prescribed rituals?
Certainly there are cases of people attaining this kind of consciousness in other traditions entirely, and outside of traditions, and spontaneously, and in forms and in terms of the order of how they did things that are totally not what, you know, these systems prescribe. So it's important for anyone in any magical tradition not to develop the illusion that theirs is the only way that works. But you can't teach everything that might work. You have to uh, teach as best you can. If you're teaching, you have to teach as best you can the tools that seem to work in the way that you have experienced them, and convey the tradition as best you can. But that shouldn't be confused with saying, you know, the only way it works is this one way.
I think the next question goes along similar lines of inquiry, but is KNC of the HGA Thelema specific? Could someone in another religious tradition achieve it, or could someone initially on a Thelemic path, who then continues in an eclectic and more lone path, achieve it by themselves without mentorship?
Yeah, so it can be spontaneous, it can be without mentorship, it can be in a non-Thelemic context. I think what happens is that the tools that unlock that KNC for a given individual will be the tools that speak to them, that speak to their soul, that speak to that provide a spiritual home for that person. So that's why some orders might be the perfect vehicle for one person, because the symbol sets mesh well and the vibe, and you know, you get along with the teachers in the tradition or whatever it is. But for another person, it might be the completely wrong place to try to do it. So I think that's an answer to that question.
And that's all the questions we have for now.
Okay, thank you. I'm seeing a few things in the chat, but I'm assuming that you've already addressed those.
I think I've addressed all of them. If anybody didn't get their questions answered, please post it again.
Just checking my notes here. Okay, so I think I'll move into a bit more of the personal side of things. A weird thing happened to me after I had that whispering of the name experience. I went to, again, I was a neophyte of AA. Someone mentioned in a question the actually, Paul, you commented on the probable intent of the question regarding the vision of the Holy Guardian Angel, which is often attributed to the grade of neophyte in the AA system. So the idea with that is that we get sort of a preview, you know, some sort of an experience of wonderment, however it may come, not necessarily as a literal vision with the eyes or the spiritual eyes, but something that gives us a glimpse of that the experience of the HGA, right? So that was kind of my conclusion initially about what the whispering of the name was for me as a neophyte. Okay, that fits with something that might be happening here, vision of the HGA. But I went to Phyllis Romero, my teacher, and told her about this, and she said, "Well, that sounds like KNC to me," you know, and she filled out, you know, a paper verifying that she was conferring the 5/6 grade on me at the time. And I just, I guess, understandably, I wasn't, that was flattering, but I wasn't quite feeling like I was satisfied that that's what that was. I'm not going to argue with the senior most living Thelemite on the planet, about or opinions of what was happening to me, but I wanted to do some more work to verify it. So what I ended up doing was continuing to do all the intervening work of the grades up to 5-6 without, as we call it, where you're an Adeptus Minor, but you still need to do the work of invocation of the HGA. And of course, all along, I was continuing to get information, building communication with the HGA, little glimmers of things. I've often used the metaphor of the radio station, like you're trying to tune in a station that's got the right transmission you want to listen to. And this is the HGA talking, it's HGA news. And you get the station for a second, and then you can't find it again. It's nothing but static. And then you get the country channel that you don't want to listen to. You keep turning, and eventually you get better at finding the station. So that's what a lot of the first order work is about, finding, to fine tuning your ability to get that station reliably. So I kept doing that kind of work, all the grades, the grade tasks that are described in Liber 185 and all the foundational sources of AA. The main takeaway for me with this, and what I'm wanting to emphasize right now, is that you will never go wrong by deepening your work toward knowledge of conversation. You will never go wrong by being extra thorough with all the tools you use and things you try. You could go horrifically wrong if you conclude you've had K and C but haven't, and then you stop. You conclude you're there, you stop doing the work, you stop questing, you stop questioning, you stop striving, because in your ego, you've concluded that you've got it. So what I always tell people when asked, like, I think I've had K and C, I think I've got the name, I think I've had these experiences, I'm not going to presume to say, no, I don't think you have. I would never do that to someone. What I would say is, look, we've got systems set up that are stepwise, repeatable paths to knowledge of conversation. And they have checks and balances in there, and they have built-in safeguards and tests to make sure that you're using tool number one correctly before you move on to tool number two. And that's no guarantee that a person will have K and C, but what it is a self-check that if we are doubting, that we have if we think maybe I missed a step, or I missed a tool I needed, or I didn't jump through the right hoop at the right time or something, it's a way to double check that. So I say to someone who says, maybe I've had K and C, okay, maybe you have. Don't assume you have. Don't assume you haven't. Keep taking notes. Watch for patterns. Keep using all the tools, and get yourself up to the formal place in the system where you would be doing the final invocation of the HGA. And wow, what if you really hadn't had it yet, and then you have it, and you're so glad you've walked through the intervening steps and really pushed yourself to do it. But if you get through all that and you get to the end and do the invocation, and turns out you've sort of had the info all along, and it's no big deal, and there's no additional huge thing that happens, well, you've satisfied yourself that you've walked through the steps, and you've deepened, I'm sure, your relationship to the HGA in the process with continued striving and devotion and aspiration. So that is all to say that I'm really glad I kept working and didn't conclude that when I was essentially formally a neophyte that I was kind of done, because I would have missed oceans of experience, self-knowledge, and spiritual awakening if I had not persisted. I can imagine what my life would look like. I cannot imagine what my life would look like if I had somehow parked it, instead of continuing to do that work. Everything that I've done that any of you have ever heard of happened because I didn't stop when I was first told I had it, um, because that was the fruits of the legitimate KNC later, as best I can tell. Um, so I got to the place, Dominus Liminis, Adeptus Minor without, in early 2004. And some interesting other things were happening in my life at this point. My father, unfortunately, was dying of cancer at the time. In in the winter, sort of the early winter months of 2004, his cancer was worsening, and so I was doing a lot of visiting of him. And I was in California, he was in Arkansas, flying back and forth. On one of those trips to fly back to see my dying father, Phyllis Seckler died, my teacher. So I'd been able to visit her in the hospital when she was hospitalized in May of 2004, but she actually died while I was back visiting my father. So that sucked, and that whole aspect of my life was really, really hard. Meanwhile, my marriage was also falling apart. I had a young son, 8 at the time, and um, all of this comes together to say that sometimes when the things we have depended on, the things we felt nourished us and supported us, all feel like they're being stripped away, the question that we tend to ask ourselves is, what is left when all that's gone? And what was left for me was the single-minded desire to attempt the KNC and throw myself fully into that path, because I knew I could kind of work on that and focus on that, even if the rest of my life seemed to be blowing up or imploding or whatever it was doing. Also, weirdly, this was probably more of a coping mechanism than anything else, but I was able to say, you know what, I don't know what's going to happen with my marriage or my, what's going on with my extended family when my dad's gone and all of that. But that guy on the other side of KNC will figure it out. So throw up my hands, like, help me, HGA. I have no idea what I'm doing here. And sometimes that's where we end up, that's what we got to do. So I went into the working with kind of that mindset of, I don't know what's next, but I'm damn sure going to find out now. So where I'm going to go next is in this talk is telling you sort of how I did it and how I approached the working, and talk a little bit about the results of that. I saw, I think, at least one question pop up, so I want to see if we can take that.
Yep, we have one question. So would you say KNC of the HGA is an event or a process? Boom, there it is, or something that begins and continues to grow and get stronger, so to speak?
It's a process with the climax. So it's not that it's not happening and then it does happen. It's that it's a process happening, that refining of one's ability to tune in, and then a climactic explosion of, all right, you fully tuned in now. And it's kind of like an orgasm. You're not going to mistake it. You're not going to think you've had it if you haven't. And I think that's one of the things that perhaps if I could redo some of the teaching I've done in the past 10 years or so on this, 10 or 15 years, I want to emphasize for people that in spite of, yes, you'll hear whispers, metaphorically, you'll have clues building all along the way. You can be attentive to these glimpses of the HGA all along the way, but that's not the full KNC. That's not the full experience, and it won't be like any other interaction with some other spiritual entity that you may have had. I would strongly suggest that um, any sort of visionary experience you've had, scrying something, talking to an angel or spirit of some kind from some, an Enochian angel or a goetic spirit or whatever you've tried and done, this will be of an entirely different character and entirely specific character. This will be an interaction with an entity that is so uniquely tied into your specific existence that you will not mistake it for the kind of interactions you might have ever had with any other spiritual beings. I forgot what question I was even addressing with that, but I wanted to put that out there.
The question was about whether KNC was an event or a process.
Okay. I think I covered it.
We have, are there multiple climaxes is the next question.
Well, that's a very personal question. Oh, you mean, let's see. In a sense, yes, like there's the initial, like when I describe the working, I think it'll make a little more sense, but you get to the climactic part of the working and the final invocation on the final day, and so that's definitely a climax. But you could say that it's almost like an extended period climax that lasts several days or weeks or months because the integration is still happening and you're kind of in a pretty, most people I know dealt with this, you're kind of in a bit of a floaty place, kind of reintegrating into the outer world and figuring out next steps. And then you are likely to find, I think, that in the months and years that follow KNC, there will be other climaxes of connection where breakthroughs might be a better word for it. That another wall falls and something else breaks through in an important way that was kind of waiting for your inner parts to get in the right place. So in that sense, I'd say, yeah, multiple enhancing experiences that happen along the way.
Looks like we have no further questions at this point.
Okay. So, what did I do and how did I do it? Crowley, as I mentioned earlier, wrote a instructional Liber called Liber Samek, which has an extended, wonderful commentary that is some of the most important and cogent and clear magical instruction he ever wrote down about the inner experience of the magician. Here's what you can visualize. Here's how you can feel your energy moving, here's where you can put your focus. Just wonderful stuff that you can apply to other rituals as well. So I took Liber Samek as one of my templates. There's other suggestions in a Liber called Liber 8, which is an extract from the 8th Aether of his Enochian scryings, Crowley's. So I kind of hybridized that. It was a 91-day working based on Liber Samek, drawing on a few elements from Liber 8 as well. The final week was a full solitary and silent retirement. Silent in the sense of being solitary, not connected with the outside world. This was pre-smartphones and stuff, so it was a little bit easier to unplug in those days. But yes, I really do mean that I was absolutely out of touch with the outer world for that final week. Had someone nearby who was stocking up the house I was in back of with food, and I would go in and shower and avoid contact and had no contact with family or friends or anyone else. the invocations intensify. So you do like a week of once a day, 2 weeks of twice a day, 3 weeks of 3 times a day, and so on. And that gets pretty energy and focus consuming, as you can imagine. I was still mostly trying to work, in between invocations up until that final retirement. Went on a family vacation. So, we're on the car ride over to the beach, I'm like, okay, honey, time to do that thing. And then I'd close my eyes and, Liber Samekh is an astral ritual. So I'd be doing that in the body of light, as we might call it. Um, while my wife at the time was driving us along. So in other words, it was inserted increasingly into my life for many weeks up until the final retirement, building in intensity, and you can really feel it too. You get better at doing the ritual inwardly. You develop other little tools that magnify it. The location ultimately for the final retirement was the freshly built Sora Merrill building in Sacramento. Sora Merrill had died, but we had built a building in her honor, and this was the first use of it. It was um, quite a structure. It still is there. It is still a Thelemic temple, and it's, I'm sure, being used in beautiful ways. But when we built it, um, we had tarot trumps that represent the faces of the cube of space. So at their appropriate locations in the walls and floor and everything. Along the spine of the building, west to east, we had buried in the foundations the trumps from the Thoth deck that correspond to the chakras. And then in the foundation in the east was a book of the law. We even put a book of the law in the hot tub on the property, so in the foundation. So that was commitment. And the inner walls weren't built yet when I did my retirement. There was just sort of sheets over the insulation. The shrine, the central sort of Holy of Holies space in the building, was right in the center of the building, within a triple circle, a sort of traditional circle with Kabbalistic names in Hebrew, and the Tefereth center with an altar. As I was in the retirement, there was just, I went from maybe having half a page to a page of diary a day to having like 14 pages of diary. And it wasn't just because of the isolation. It was like a download of, write this down. Here's this new idea. Here's this new thing to try with the name of the angel. And this is where I realized how much I had not accomplished years earlier with the sort of the vision of the HGA, because this didn't feel like thoughts I was having. This felt like thoughts being given to me, and there's that very tangible sense of it being handed to me, and not just oh, I've been meditating a lot, so I got some cool insights. It's way beyond that. I was very absorbed into the process, very intense in my meditations. And the material I was getting, I knew I could not have consciously generated. I'm a smart person, but I'm not that smart. I mean, you can tell when something is beyond you. And oh my God, never thought of that. I wouldn't have thought of that. How could, so I start putting all these pieces together in ways that proved to me that this wasn't just me, in quotes, and, just the quality of it was too distinct from my normal way of thought and living. At the climax, the words I would use to describe the vibe, the feeling of it, just descriptors really: warmth, light, presence, especially presence, like a physical presence, embracing, but also there's this feeling that is like you have a secret lover, you know, but you just like smile inwardly that you've got this lover, and everything you do in life, you can feel it with you. It's very distinct and powerful that way. There was a thickness and vibrancy in the air. I like to say that it's like the space between the molecules felt and looked different. It just was very charged and thick. Now, I mentioned the specificity before, like that this will be an entity that has such a unique connection to you that there's no confusing it with anything else. So this is why, in my view, it is extremely unlikely that anyone's HGA is actually an entity anyone else has ever heard of. You will sometimes come across people who say, "Oh, my HGA is Babylon," or "My HGA is Crowley," or whatever, or Hecate, or Zeus, or things like that. But those are so, these are traditional, broader energies that we all partake of. We've all got a Zeus part, we've all got a Babylon energy. These are communal things, but the HGA is intimately bound up with our individual existence in a way that is way more specific than any of those other entities. So be ready to find your own unique relationship with your own unique personal God, that is none of those existing things. Certainly not just the higher self feeling. The other thing with the specificity of the experience is like the material that was coming through and the understandings about myself and my past and my present and where I can go in the future. It's like the HGA had used everything I was good at to help me, and it had compensated for everything I was not good at to help me. And in the months and years leading up all along my magical path and everything, all the tools I developed, end up getting utilized. So basically, this just to say that the HGA will use all of you to help you get to where you can listen to it more effectively if you let it. And the new understanding you have of yourself will be like, well, of course, this is like, no wonder this perfectly explains everything I've been. But at the same time, it also is so much more than you've ever thought of yourself to be, that you'll have a sense of wonder on both sides of that equation, I would expect. So the experience sort of like gives you a new spiritual context for your entire life, and which you might expect with a deeper understanding of true will. Like, oh, no wonder this is why I had to be shaped in all these ways to be able to maximally live out my true will. And in pointing you forward, it is a very crystal clear vision of like how to utilize the true will in the world and bring the best of yourself to it. Okay, and I have some other notes about the courtship versus the wedding versus working on the marriage, but I think I've addressed that in the questions. But basically, that was my experience, and in the years following, as may not come as a surprise, I mean, the things that I have done with my world, with my life in the magical world, like the Living Thelemic podcast and my writings, and starting the Temple of the Silver Star and running that, and my work in AA and so on. It's all been specifically fed by, in many cases, by like information that came to me through the KNC working, and some of the symbol systems that the symbol sets that showed up there that got integrated eventually into magical orders that I'm overseeing, and things again I would not have thought of myself, but clearly were a part of like here's what you do with your true will now, and the journey beyond knowledge and conversation. So pretty a wild ride, but to me personally anyway, it was a validation of the system and the way that Crowley's thoughts around how any human consciousness evolving from the earliest days of aspiration through to knowledge and conversation, through to crossing the abyss and so on. His vision of that system and the description of how a person evolves just seems spot on. And my own personal experience with this has, and watching others do it too, has really cemented my belief that this is a wonderfully structured system that was left to us, and that we're still a living tradition that we're growing and contributing to. So let me take any other questions that have come up. I'm happy to think about answering personal questions, if that's the kind of question you have in terms of my own experience, and I'll say so if I'm not ready to go there or whatever. But I'm also happy to continue to answer more conceptual questions about any of this. I see what's the role of samadhi pop up there.
Yeah, that is our next question.
So I would talk about this in this way. I would say that knowledge and conversation is like samadhi plus the ultimate specificity of that experience that makes it what it is. So we can have samadhi lots of times, lots of ways, lots of contexts, but they're not all knowledge and conversation of the HTA. There is some sort of uniting of the power of samadhi with the specificity of our invocations and the work we've been doing to walk that specific path toward the HGA that makes it different. That's a great question. That is one I've heard before, and it's always interesting to ponder.
Our next question is, do you have to create your own ritual, your own working to have the KNC in the context of the Thelemic path?
There's no have-tos here, except you have to do what's right for you. That's not intended as a cop-out, but I think many people will find that what they end up wanting/needing to do, and probably in a way that will feel obvious at the time, is to use certain ritual tools and techniques that you developed, things that you know from working over the years really work for you, things that fire up your aspiration devotionally, that work to bring in force for you, that help you focus, meditative techniques that you know work best to cultivate that strength focus. I think it's kind of inevitable that you will fashion something very unique for yourself, but that's not an externally imposed have to. That's just what I think tends to happen.
Our next question is, what role does sex have in the KNC working? Lots of sex, no sex, is it relevant?
I think it's entirely possible that one could use the sexual techniques in various ways through the build up to the final working, and perhaps in the final working itself. Doesn't have to be there. Again, there's no have-tos in this. I think people will use the tools that work best for them. There's also very much a sort of an answer to the question that there's very much a sense that well, I guess I already hinted at this, that like the knowledge and conversation, the climactic experience itself has a sexual quality in terms of the ecstatic quality of it, and also the sort of romance quality of it. The secret lover idea is almost like a foreplay kind of thing, the courtship, as I've called it. But no have-tos, and sex magic, sexual techniques are like any other magical technique. They can be utilized in service of a higher ritual aim, and in this case, sort of the ultimate ritual aim.
Thank you. The next question is, so I struggle with the idea of a separate entity. Is there a way to explain this in more psychological terms, or am I just completely off base with my unbelief in that separateness?
Well, first of all, you don't have to believe anything that you haven't experienced. What I would say to, I'm not sure who's asking the question, but if you were a student in an organization that if I was supervising your magical work and you asked me that question, I would say you don't have to believe anything you haven't experienced and satisfied yourself that you should believe. It's also not necessary to intellectually believe that you're dealing with a separate entity, because perhaps your experience will not be that. Um, that doesn't mean that uh, you don't have to front load with expectations of what you should believe about what it's going to be. Um, there are times when it is really useful to strengthen the muscles of interacting with external, with at least acting as if we are interacting with external beings for its own sake, because that's a unique kind of magical muscle. That's why things like evoking entities to visible appearance is one of the tasks of AA. Practicing externalizing a sense of externalized force and consciousness that you are interacting with. It doesn't matter whether you ultimately conclude that that is a psychological experience or a true interaction with an external entity for you, because you'll know the truth when you've experienced it, whatever it is for you. So, um, again, really not trying to give a cop-out answer. It's just highly individualized that way. And there's not many things in this system that Crowley left us that require us to believe something doctrinal or dogmatic or specific metaphysical realities, before we can do experiments and come to our own conclusions.
Thank you. So we have no further questions at this point. Oh, now we have one actually. How is the daemon related to the HGA?
You'll see those words used interchangeably. So Crowley originally started using the Holy Guardian Angel as the name for the entity. I don't have the quote in front of me, but many of you have probably seen it, where he um, was trying to use a term that was so ridiculous that no one would take it too seriously as a term. Um, Other traditions have certainly used the name HGA previously, but daemon, we see Agoades. Some have used the term higher self, uh, Christ consciousness, everything in between. Whatever name for enlightenment you want to slap on it. Um, Not all of the names for enlightenment have the connotation of a being, but I think the nature of the attainment is the same regardless of how it's termed. So you also sometimes see, some people use the term daemon with, connected to the idea of a demon or like an evil genius, or, sort of the shadow of the HGA experience, or the sinister thing, the dweller on the threshold that gets us, that takes us off track, or the Choronzon energy, to use Crowley's term, that confuses us and distracts us, and so on. But I don't see any of those things as external demons, or things where we need to hold a lot of fear around them. I think if we've done our work to look at our own psychological shadow and know what our pitfalls are, and know how we tend to bullshit ourselves about stuff, that bullshit detector will continue to serve us. And the daemon in question is really just another term for HGA. I think that's the way it is most useful to think about it.
Thank you. So we have another couple of questions. Curious if you would have time for a very quick private conversation when the presentation is over. One of the guests is asking.
Happy to have a private conversation. I can't guarantee that immediately after presentation would be a good time, but yeah, feel free to email me at what's easy, david@livingthelema.com. And you can also always reach me at prolocutor@totss.org. It's my title as the head of the Temple of the Silver Star. So email me privately, be happy to.
And next question, using the star sapphire to bring closer contact with the HGA at the climax when forming the Rosy Cross and drinking the sacrament, set appearing in the circle, is it helpful to experiment with male and female energies appearing to help get a sense if our HGA is wanting to be a specific gender?
One, I wouldn't assume that results you get from Star Sapphire will necessarily teach you about your HGA invocation. They might not. Two, I would suggest that you don't decide to visualize or experience any sort of gendered nature to anything. Why impose limitations that may not need to be there? So I would suggest just leaving it open and seeing what happens. I used the Star Sapphire actually after KNC as a short form, and I continue to use it this way as a short form kind of recommuning with the HGA because it's very well suited to that, and in many ways mirrors some of the actions within Liber Samec if you compare them side by side, especially that climactic part of, at least the way I approach Star Sapphire, the climactic part of surging upwards as far as you can possibly imagine, and then opening yourself up for the reflux of the energy to come back into you. That happens energetically in both Samec and Star Sapphire.
Next question is, can you list some sources on HGA rituals and the grade system of the AA for someone that is not too familiar with the Thelemic system?
Sure. Of course, the foundational writings and the most important ones are the ones that are very public domain now in terms of Crowley's writings on AA. A billion libras to look at there. In terms of angles of explication of the system, my book Living Thelema has a lot of the foundational stuff about that, the true will, the HGA, the basic practices. My new book, The Way of the Will, which has just come out from Wiser, and you can order it from them. It's be on Amazon as of May 6th. And in there, I've got some of this kind of a discussion of the HGA, sort of a personal memoir, and commentary on other advanced practices within the AA tradition. There's also a 4-part large chapter on Kabbalistic psychology. So looking at how to understand the progress of an initiate through the AA system via understanding the inner psychological and spiritual workings. So there's that stuff from me. Probably the best sort of grade by grade analysis of the system of AA is James Eshelman's Mystical and Magical System of the AA, which I think is still in print. That's just a very clear linear laying out of things. And the way that book is structured, with the exception of the first chapter that is related to some of the specific organizations that Eshelman works with, the chapter by chapter analysis is pretty orthodox in terms of sticking to Crowley's foundational documents, so should apply to if there are different groups out there claiming to be AA, and if any of them are really trying to structure themselves along Crowley's writings, then the Eshelman book's a pretty good description of what that path would probably look like. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to the question about resources, but there you go.
So we have someone asking what is the book again. I'll drop the information, the Echelon book, in the chat for everyone. And the next question is it possible to fail to attain KNC after attempting the work? What are the potential implications of that in your life? Have you ever known someone who did not successfully merge with their HGA? How often does a working like this fail?
I've never seen anyone get to the place of the final invocation of the HGA and have it not work. I've seen plenty of people stop working before they get there. And I've said this before, it's worth reiterating that it always feels to me that the system of AA and our implementation of related tools in Temple of the Silver Star is I've not seen it not work for someone who has continued and persisted in it. I've seen people fail through lack of persistence and leaving the path or giving up or whatever. Now that's not to say they might have gone on and had success in some other approach entirely, which I hope they did. But I have literally zero examples in my life of people who have really walked the entire structured path, gotten to the KNC invocation phase and tried it and have it not worked.
We have no further questions at this point. So,
all right. Well, I will call that the last question then, and let me just wrap up with pointers to some organizations and websites, and then we'll wrap it up. But you can always find out more about the system of the AA by going to onestarinsight.org. You can find out more about the Temple of the Silver Star at totss.org. Upcoming events that may be of interest. June 30th, I'll be delivering a talk on ritual construction live in Tacoma, Washington, and we're going to live stream that as well. And then October 4th through 6th is Thelemic, which is open to anyone, regardless of membership in an organization or not. It's happening here. This will be the fourth one we've had. It's happening here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And again, it's October 4th through 6th. You can go to thelemic.org for more on that. And I want to close just by saying that in keeping with my last comments about persistence and how important that is, that if you can keep persisting in the path, even in those dark times when you're doubting that you can do it, when you're doubting that you have the energy or the stamina or the will or the value in yourself to continue, don't stop. Take a break if you need to, get back to the basics, manage your life in other ways, take care of yourself. But don't ever doubt that if you persist, you can attain in a way that will be fitting for your own true will. I truly believe that, and I want to encourage all of you to stick with it if you're inspired to. So thank you all for being here. You've been asking some great questions and great comments. I really appreciate it, and I will hopefully see some of you in other events down the line. So I will say farewell for now. Love is the law, love under will.